In 1950, it began as an idea to gather some people together of similar background and beliefs to have a Bible-teaching church here in Troy, Ohio. And in January of 1951, that idea became a reality, as this group of people gathered together for singing, preaching, and fellowship for the very first time of a church that would be called at the time Troy Church of Christ. This group had no paid staff, no building, and no assets. All they had was a steadfast desire to connect people to Jesus. It was not long after that initial service when a need was recognized for a place to meet. And in April of 1951, this new church, with still only about 18 to 20 people giving, was able to make a down payment on their very first building on the corner of Canal and Count Streets here in Troy. And while it is easy to look at pictures and tell the story, what we must not miss is the personal sacrifice that was invested by so many to make the vision of this church become a reality. As is often the case with groups like this, over time there was a great deal of change and growth. This all culminated in 1963 when the Troy Church of Christ hired their first part-time preaching minister. He was a young student from Cincinnati Bible College named Conrad Bauer, who would come to preach on the weekends. It was also in 1963 that the church moved from their facility on Canal and Count to a white building at the junction of Monroe, Canal, and McCaig. There are lots of names of people baptized that we could go through, lots of names of people who grew in their faith, and many names of those who were touched by acts of kindness and service. But throughout the history, it was never about buildings or numbers. This group of people existed because there was a passion. A passion not to just show up on Sundays, but a passion to connect their friends, family, and community to Jesus. With an eye toward the future, the church leadership recognized that the facility they were meeting in had significant limitations on both space and parking. And so it was in 1977 that the plot of land was purchased where the current church building now sits. This was before there were plans to relocate, before there were any plans to actually build, but with the vision and intention that down the road something greater would be needed to connect the community of Troy, Ohio, to Jesus. Another significant change happened in the history of the church when the name changed from Troy Church of Christ to Troy Christian Church. A great deal more could be said about the history of TCC. There have been numerous preaching ministers and even more staff. There have been exciting seasons of growth, as well as difficult, painful seasons filled with trials and transitions. Yet as a church, here we stand in our 65th year of existence, a people committed to the same purpose as those initial founders, to connect people to Jesus. In 2007, a property on the west side of Troy was purchased by TCC, again with the long-term vision of doing something even greater to serve our church fellowship in the city of Troy. Today, over 15,000 people in Troy are not connected with a local church body. And while only God Himself knows what the next chapter in the life of Troy Christian Church will hold, one thing we can be sure of: the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And Troy Christian Church will exist to connect those outside of Christ to Jesus for hopefully another 65 years and beyond.